Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Here we want to fulfill the assignments given by Miss Afifa Raihani. And today we will discuss about macro and micro environment factors. But before we start our discussion today, let's us introduce ourselves first. My name is Karmila as a first presenter, and my partner is Nailus Zulfani as a second presenter.
My name is Nailus Zulfani. I'm a second speaker.
The definition of language environment. The language environments include the situation of everything that can be heard and seen by speakers in a particular area where a language is used. So, the language environment is everything that can be heard and seen, which also affect the language communication process, which includes the language environment is such as the situation in the classroom during the learning process, in markets, shopping center, restaurants, conversation with a group of people, and many others. There are two types of language environment factors. There are macro and micro environment factors. Here I'm going to explain macro environment factors. Macro environments include naturalness of the language heard, the learner's role in communication, the availability of concrete reference to clarify meaning, and who the target models are. The first is naturalness of the language heard. The natural language environments happens when the speakers focus on the content of the communication. If the speaker focus on the form of the language, it means that the language environment is formal. The benefit of natural environment is that the students can perform better and more fluency than in a formal environment. Whereas the limitations are lack of peers who speak the target language natively, incomprehensibility of the communication, and lack of one's silent period, the time when one can absorb the new language but do not need to produce it. The second is the learner's role in communication. There are three types of communication where the learners take part in it. The first is one-way communication, the second is restricted two-way communication, and the last is full two-way communication. In one-way communication, learners listen or read the second language without responding. Examples of one-way communication are listening to conversation and listening to radio, broadcast, watching movies, television show, reading book or magazines. In restricted two-way communication, learners respond orally to someone, but learners do not use second language. The responses using first language or others means of communication that are not second language include non-verbal responses such as nodding the head. In full two-way communication, learners speak in second language, a sender and receiver of verbal message. The third is the availability of concrete reference to clarify meaning. Concrete reference refer to any subjects and events that can be seen, heard, or felt while the language is being used. They help the learners to figure out the meaning of the language used. Second language teachers are required to realize the importance of providing a context for the second language through visual aids, motor activities in the now and here context so that the meaning of the new language is clearly understood by learners. And the last is who the target models are. There are many speakers models available. Anyone who speaks the target language could be a potential model. Models can be friends of students, teachers, parents, and ethnic groups. However, students have their own model preferences to imitate. The learner's choice of model significantly affects the quality of the resulting speech.
After we study and explain about the definition of language environment and the factor of macro language environment, we go to discuss about micro factor language environment. Micro environment factors are characteristic of language structures that more specific or specific to what learner hear. There are three micro factors for the language environment that have been studied with the perspective of their language on the level and quality of language acquisition. The first is salience, the second is feedback, and the third is frequency. First is salience, refers to something stand out the most. What stand out is usually easy to see and hear. For example, most people are familiar with the use of the article in English rather than the past tense, which is indicated by the addition of ed, which is simply placed at the end of the verb. The second is feedback. Feedback refers to the listener's or reader's response given the learner's speech or writing. However, in acquiring the language, feedback generally refers to the response of listeners and speakers given to the listener's word or writings. This type of feedback takes the form of correction, approval, and positive feedback. And the third is frequency. In the problem of language acquisition, the frequency, of course, of a structure refers to the number of times the learners hears and given structure. For example, is someone can count the number of times appear in a mother's word to her child in a situation that can represent what the child hears a whole. This count can be considered child language environment. So the conclusion here, whereas in macro environment include natural language here and the learner's role in communication and availability of concrete reference to clarify meaning and who the target model are. So in this case, the microenvironment factors do not seem to have much effects on learning as expected. Okay, I think enough for me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.